just for your information, I'm Lars, and that is Amos. Hearing you, and a question from Ole in Kenya, and, about traditional clothing. When we started guide training and having Amos and others doing the guiding at BaseCamp in Kenya, we were really concerned that they were going to use their traditional clothes. So you would see them driving tourists with a blanket flapping out of the window of a Land Cruiser. And people were saying, really, can they also drive? And that was something that became very important, I think, and maybe Amos has a comment to that. Why was it so important to use your traditional clothes in your everyday work?
Good morning. I think, as for me, it's very important that as a Maasai, the indigenous of the southern part of Kenya, it's important that we put on our traditional clothing. And as we all know, first impression lasts forever. And we are very proud, particularly I'm very proud of my culture. And I always talk about it whenever I get time and chance to do it. So when I go out on the savannah, where my great-grandfathers were living, and try to reveal the stories, as my friend Leonard was saying, I'm very proud to show them when I'm on my Maasai attire, which is very important. It makes a different feeling. As when you're walking on trousers, for example. I don't normally do it. I've never done it. So it's very important, and it makes a feeling. I mean, guests would ask so many questions about my spear, for example. How I make my shoes, my sword, or where the sword has come from. I'm very proud to tell them the story of the Maasai, how they came about. So that makes all, the culture and the nature to integrate, to make a very good impression and lasting one to my guests.
Okay. We are going to try to give you two stories. One story is about the Masai Mara and what is happening in the Masai Mara and the reserve as such. It's a protected area, and it's a wonderful ecosystem, very rich. That's one story. The other story is what is the problem concerning the Maasai community, the local people, the indigenous people there. Are they benefiting from this? Are they getting those rights out of this fantastic area? Or are there problems, and how can we address, how can we build a model, some form of solution for the future, where they, if they don't get the rights today, where they can get the rights tomorrow? And one question I have for you, just to understand, how many of you have been to Masai Mara or Serengeti in Kenya or Tanzania? Quite a few. Who of you have been to a protected area anywhere in the world where there is indigenous people around it? So then I think you will have, that's all of you actually. So that's good. Then you have a relationship, hopefully, to what we're trying to the message we want to convey to you. This is Sironka Ole Tinnia, and I think the picture is from 1998. I think he died just after this, but he is the symbol for us, for BaseCamp. He invited BaseCamp to Masai Mara to develop a model where we, with tourism, would integrate responsibilities and values, sharing, etc., with the Maasai culture, in allowing us to lease part of his land to build up a community-based ecotourism activity that we call BaseCamp Masai Mara. So BaseCamp Explorer is the mother company. We're a business organization. What we do is that we develop ecotourism destinations. And we spoke yesterday about a grammar or a syntax where you look at nature and culture and you take it into that process of developing a destination. What do you need to think about? What are the risks, the pitfalls, and the opportunities in doing this? So we'll try to take you through these two stories. We call this a wildlife and Boma community-based conservancy in Masai Mara, and it's actually a development project that is ongoing right now. We're looking at finding a model that we can find finance for. So it's not only the fact that we should share the outcome of this conservancy, we also have to fund it. We cannot do this alone, it costs quite a bit of money, so we are also looking for funding from governments, from organizations, and from our own business. So it has to come in from many ends. So where are we? Sorry, I have to go back there. I'm spilling the beans. Where are we? We are in Kenya, and Masai Mara Serengeti ecosystem, and we will talk about the little red dot up there, which is the Masai Mara National Reserve and the areas around it. I will try to show you on a picture very soon. Amos, tell us a little bit about the Mara ecosystem and why it's so famous. It's been awarded or voted one of the new 7 wonders of the world. And maybe you can tell us something about that.
Okay. I wish the Maasai know it's the 7th wonder of the world. But of course they do. They have kept the place for many generations. That's why it has been voted the 7th wonder of the world. And the animals and the ecosystem of the Mara is such a rich biodiversity. It has got an enormous number of animals that cross into the Mara every year. We have quite, like about almost 100 mammals and approximately 550 species of birds. So it makes it quite a famous place on Earth. If you stand in at one point, you could count over 15 species on one spot. That's amazing. Of course, we have the big 5. One of them being the lion, the king of the jungle. See the jaws, clearly tells. And the birds, I've said we have about 550 species. And in the camp alone, BaseCamp, we have over, now 200 species of birds in the Mara compound alone, the camp. And the Maasai way of life that has kept this place up to now is their way of life that is very, very unique. They don't poach animals, wild animals. They don't do sport hunting. The only time they come across wild animals is when they're protecting themselves, their colleagues, or their cows. And their way of life is, walking in the savannah, getting blood from the cows, and the experience of walking. That's what we apply when leading our guests. The indigenous knowledge has been passed for us from many generations by our great-grandfathers. BaseCamp Masai Mara is situated on the northern boundary of the Great Masai Mara National Reserve, and in this photo we are standing right in the reserve and overlooking down to the camp. The river is just between the gazelles, just in front of the camp. It's very unique out there because there is interaction between the local people, the Maasai, us, and the guests. The stories begin here, and at the end of your stay as a tourist, you leave with an impression of having seen the beautiful Maasai country, their animals, but the most important thing, you go home with a friend, having made a friend. That's very unique.
Right, thank you, Amos. Now, I will have the challenge of making a dynamic power presentation. I'm going to draw I'm sure you will recognize what it is. Right? This is the Masai Mara National Reserve, and this is the Serengeti National Park. This area is approximately 1,600.
Lars, put it up on the desk over.
It's very heavy. You're right. Thank you. So we're talking about size here, 1,600 square kilometers for this area. This is 1/10 of the entire Mara Serengeti ecosystem. So it's a huge area. The part in the Mara is quite small, and it's surrounded by an area that is more than 1,600 square kilometers. Now, why am I telling you this? The reason is that the entire ecosystem here was used by Maasai 70, 80, 90 years ago. It was part of that pastoralist culture where they were roaming around, grazing, grazing these savannas. When this national reserve and national park when they were designated, the people moved out in the surrounding areas. This is a very common thing that happens when you protect an area. And we've seen the values, so we understand why it's protected. It has the largest populations of great big mammals in the world. Now, this challenge here is that the Maasai, being marginalized, keeping their cattle in a smaller area, overgrazing the land, causing soil erosion, causing poorer quality of water quality. So a number of effects that are coming from that situation where you've been confined to a smaller geographical area. Now, if I would ask Amos, what does this challenge mean to you and to the people today in the Mara? What happens to your culture in this situation?
Going back a little bit, in history, Maasai have been losing land for so long, and this is like 100 years ago, or more, when the white man came to the Maasai land. The Maasai were divided, and the Northern Territory, which is in the northern part of Kenya, was lost, and the Maasai were pushed and split into two. The small splinter still lives in the Northern Territory, and the major part lives in the southern part of Kenya. And that was quite a huge chunk of land. And now they created again national reserves and national parks. That further reduced the size of the Maasai land. And now we're left with the buffer zones where all the animals are grazing, the Maasai are living there. And now there's subdivision of land, and that means a lot of things. One of the things is that due to so many reasons, people start selling land because there is a need, because now you have your piece of land, privatization, that you can do anything to your land. And when this happens, the Maasai culture will be lost, because the buyers are people, rich people from Nairobi or anywhere else, and coming to dissolve the Maasai culture. The culture will be lost. What will happen to the wildlife? The wildlife will be lost as well. The corridors are closing, the land is getting smaller, so the pressure gets higher and higher. And the only option, only alternative, is from tourism, sustainable tourism, the tourism that can benefit the whole community.
Right, so we can identify there is a pressure on this land, so the land becomes relatively smaller and smaller for the Maasai. Now, let's do the mathematics for income. How much money is coming into this area yearly? There is about 250,000 visitors to the Masai Mara every year. And they stay on an average, I think, 2.8 nights. that means that you end up with something like 700,000 day visitors in a year. So only that number is a great impact. They all have to be transported, they all have to have food, and so forth. Very few, if you look at how many Maasai are directly in touch with these visitors and work with them, there are very few that directly benefit from that. So now, the 700,000 times the $40 that you pay every day to visit the park gives you a bottom line income for the reserve of about $28 million per year. That's more than I have. Now that 28 million is not supposed to go back to the Maasai and their communities and their development in total. They're supposed to get 19% from the county council. The county council is the administrator and the manager of the reserve because it's not a national park. The 19% adds up to something like, it's more than $5 million per year. If you look at the infrastructure, if you look at education, the status of healthcare, all these things, you realize that those 5 million have never been seen in that area. But there are quite a few big Mercedes-Benz, very nice BMWs in the county council that surrounds this area. We're talking about, in clear language, a very deeply rooted corruption. So what happens is that when you marginalize a people and they have no share in that income, they get very frustrated and actually quite angry. So what can we do to more equitably share this benefit for the Maasai in the future? So we want to present, or try to present, a model that we hope could work for the future. Now I'm going to move this again, because otherwise you won't see. I promise you not to become theoretical, and Amos has promised the same, but just to show you a few things that is behind. This was just picked up from a book that was sold here yesterday. And I looked through it, and there was a chapter on local people's rights and responsibilities. And this is what it says in the book. These are a few of the things. We need to have a holistic approach to the entire environment, not only wildlife, but the social and cultural and economic environment in the area as well. We have to look at all those aspects to satisfy people and wildlife, conservation and local culture. Problems are about how benefits are distributed, and we just saw an example of finance distribution or lack of finance distribution. It's about exclusion, how people are moved out from a land area into and marginalized into poorer land. It's about poor governance, that you don't allow people to participate. It's about intellectual property rights. Magnus, you may comment on the Maasai traditional medicine and what's happening when you lose the trees and the effect that it has on your culture. Maybe you have a comment on that.
Sure. Maasai use their medicine that's entirely extracted from the bushes, from the trees of the Mara, or from the trees around the Maasai. And when the population, is growing, it's a growth of population, and it means more and more need for cutting down trees for survival or building houses. And so to lose this will completely destroy the whole belief of that herbal medicine useful for the Maasai community. Up to now, people are still saying herbal medicine is better than going to the clinic and getting a shot of some drug to cure malaria. So it's of great importance to continue keeping our traditional trees and bushes in our Mara.
Can you see that in the bottom line? For you who can't read it, it says civic, environmental and cultural education. Now, we've talked about rights, that you have a right to be included, you have a right to have a benefit, but you also have a responsibility as a local community to take part and understand what's happening to your own environment. You can't, from the money you earn, keep investing in cows, for example. That puts more pressure on land, that overgrazes. You can't continue to use trees and the environment in an unsustainable way, because that will then again counteract the fact that the asset is the environment. That's what people are coming to see. Wildlife, also culture, but so also the people has a responsibility to understand and learn and take part in the action. And when we develop a destination, and one of the biggest and most important assets is actually people living in that area. How can we work together with them? So Amos, you're a guide, and what is the value of coming in as a person from herding cows and cattle and then becoming a guide? We've heard Pathfinder speaking here before. How do you do that? Is it easy, difficult? Does it work well?
Thank you again. And from us, guiding is something that is in his blood, because that's part of the lessons you learn from your grandfathers, from your grandmothers. How to survive the nature. It's cruel. We are animals, and animals are not friendly to man. And as for myself, I always make this example how I came to become a guide. And I don't know time, but I have to tell you this. I came just like a hard boy with my little spear and asking for a job. I really admire giving stories. And I met Lars and I said no, and I had to go through a series of quite unpleasant trainings that I didn't like. For example, I started with wheelbarrow, push the wheelbarrow, construction, building houses. That was not what I wanted. I knew what I wanted. And then I came in and I started going out with the guests, showing all the little nitty-gritty things you don't get to see out on game drives. The tracks of light, for example, elephants, testing leaves, hearing, listening to the sounds, smelling. All these things are very, very interesting to me. And so many of us are just from the villages and without basic knowledge of like going out to a formal education or from out of college having some papers. You already have the knowledge up here. So with the Masa, it's very interesting. And when we do these activities, it's of high quality.
Thanks. That's one example on what you can do to empower local people. First of all, you give them a job and you give them training. And today we have about 45 permanent staff working in a camp with 16 tents. So we're highly staffed, and they're all basically from Masai Mara and the local region. We also have a very clear gender policy that we're trying to employ more and more women. And in the Maasai culture, that is a slow process because people are not used, families are not used, and men are not used to allow women to go out and work for an income. This is our first manager of the camp, Tita. Today we have another woman who is a manager. We started with 0% women 6-7 years ago, and it's about 20% women employed today. We work with environmental issues. We've seen that it's overgrazed. We're planting trees. We planted about 30,000 trees, but we're not doing it ourselves. It's been a training process where these guys, especially the one, the taller guy here, is an entrepreneur today, and he earns his income from planting trees, which is a wonderful thing. So when you want to come to BaseCamp Masai Mara, you want to offset your carbon, that's a good thing to do, which we believe. Then we tell him, we have another 5 people coming, please plant 25 trees for them. And he goes out and does that and earns an income. That's empowerment. We look at culture. This is the Maasai brand, which is an arts and crafts project employing 130 women. They're all local from the villages around. They've been picked as the 6 poorest maniatas or villages, and they produce what Amos is wearing, basically, the traditional crafts. And it counteracts what we call financial prostitution, where you're standing at the gate pushing poor quality artifacts, and then some man takes over the income when you leave that. This goes back to them directly, and it's another form of empowerment and gender sensitivity. These are a few examples where we work with education, we work with cultural support, conservation and sustainable energy and water use. And we have chosen to call this the BaseCamp Big 5 Ecotourism. So Amos talked about the Big 5 or the very flashy animals we come to see. We want to turn this around and make people aware that there are a number of things we need to consider in ecotourism. And these are the 5 generic areas of sustainable development: health, education, conservation, special care for energy and water. These are all part of the model that we want to use in order to counteract the fact that Masais or local people are excluded from that income and that possibility of earning a job, earning a training, understanding more about your own culture, value it higher, and in particular, of course, for the guests to understand more about this and become aware about the situation. Now, the final thing I would like to mention, because I think the time is out, is that what happens today in the Mara, and I'll bring this back for you, is that up here we would like to create a community-based Boma and Wildlife Conservancy. We want the Maasai to become partners in this project. As Amos explained, this land is now subdivided into private plots. It's sold out. Someone wants to earn money from maize farming, another one wants to earn money by selling a piece of land where you build your house. There is uncontrolled tourism developing in the area, and we need to do something to counteract that. The best way to do that is not to sell it out and privatize it, is to keep it in a communal management form. And poverty alleviation, one of the biggest and most important processes, has been said, is to privatize land. In this case, it's the opposite. If we privatize land here, we risk that poverty becomes stronger. So the model here is one that hopefully you can see and copy into those experiences where you have been around in the world and you've seen these communities in the protected areas or around the protected areas. And hopefully we will raise $1 million in 12 months. 50% from our own network and 50% from your network and other networks. So we're calling upon the Norwegian government or the Swedish SIDA or Conservation International or WWF to come in, look at these models, support them actively. The way it is today is that ecotourism has a possibility to do many good things. There are pitfalls we have to avoid, but we stand quite alone. When we develop destinations today, we get very little real support for this. So we are asking for that support to become more visible through this presentation. And I have to push this button once more. The story is finished, but we'll continue, Amos and I and BaseCamp and everyone else here, I think, who's for ecotourism, that the commitment to communities and conservation will continue for a long time. And hopefully this is a model that you can take with you and argue for. We will do it. Thank you very much for listening. And
well, there is not much time for questions, but I'll pose one. And that is, you have presented, I think, a good example of an ecotourism resort. How is this related to the other businesses around in the area? Are you deviant one or the typical one?
That's a good question. One of the aims that we have put forward internally in BaseCamp is to challenge the tourism industry to become more sustainable. We're not saying that we're doing everything right. We do a lot of things wrong still, and we're learning. It's a learning process. But in the Mara, you could say that there are, to answer that question, there are 3,500 beds to be filled. They need to be filled at about 65% occupancy per year in order to make profit. Out of those 3,500, I'd say 10% of those beds are in a sustainable, has a sustainable platform and character. There are many good examples besides us, very many. Ilinguese is a very good example on a community-based ecotourism. So speak to this gentleman, you get another picture, but I think many of these things we hold as similar values when we develop the destination. But the major part of the operators in the Mara are unsustainable, totally unsustainable.
Okay, one more question and we proceed.
Andrew Croglan from the WWF. Thank you very much for the kind invitation. Fascinating presentation. I have just one politically based question. You told us about the rampant corruption in Kenya and the county council. How can you, as a project, together with your employees, work towards changing that? Because that is basically a key question in any African country, be it on a national or on a local level.
Yeah, that's a big question. Nevertheless, very important. And I think, Amos, you will correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm crossing a boundary here, but the area where we're proposing a conservancy has been under communal management before. It's called the group ranch system, and it's managed by Maasai, by people from that community. That system has also been proven to be corrupt. So actually people have not benefited from their own people. And this is not unusual, that when you get your hands on these resources, it becomes very difficult to work with equitable distribution of money. One thing is, of course, that counteracts this is awareness and education. And in a conservancy model where you invite people to become part owners, you invest with your land, you become part of the trustees. You can broaden that. You can have 200-300 trustees. You can have one for every piece of land. So you're distributing that wealth very clear, very early. You don't collect it, keep it somewhere, and then it's supposed to go out. It goes out immediately. And that's where you come closer to the revenue, basically. And that's one way. I think maybe almost, maybe I should not ask you to answer that question because I can't answer it very well. But I think you have an opportunity to, I mentioned civic information or education on environment and culture. I think that is very, very important that we give them a chance. We give these people, where we are coming in, bringing in resources, a chance to understand what this can do, both good and bad for the community and the culture. So education, awareness, and direct revenue distribution is really what I think.
Thank you, Lars. I think we have to stop there. Thank you, Lars, and thank you, Amos, for your presentation.